This is Tracy Hales Vass, right on Four Corners on KSJE 90.9 FM. Today I'm talking to Margaret Cheasebro about her book Healing with Trees, Finding a Path to Wholeness. Hello, Margaret.
Well, hi, Tracy.
Thanks so much for coming into the studio today.
You are so welcome. I'm glad to be here.
I really enjoyed reading Healing with Trees and learning about how to connect with trees and how you connect with trees.
Yes.
So tell our audience what your book, Healing with Trees, is about.
Well, it's several sections. The first section is explaining my experiences with trees and how I came to discover that I could communicate with them and they could communicate with me, which sounds kind of strange, but it actually can happen if we just take the time to be quiet and listen as we stand by trees. And then there's a short section involving exercises that I learned from the trees about how to stay grounded and balanced and to let go of emotions that are creating difficulties for us. And the last half of the book is a series of tools, 11 categories of tools with 10 tools under each category that the trees helped me to understand, to do things like, some of the categories are protection tools, leadership tools, communication tools, those kinds of things.
This would be a good time for you to read a little bit for us.
Okay. Well, I think what I would read first would be just a portion of one of my experiences with a tree. A narrow-leaf cottonwood whose branches have curved and looped to handle challenges. The giving tree has discovered how to bend with the circumstances. It has learned to take life lightly, bending, adjusting, and adapting to whatever happens. It lets go of anything that no longer serves it well, and the graceful beauty that results makes its branches a work of art. Once, after visiting with the giving tree, I started to walk away, but it called me back. From several yards away, I looked back at the cottonwood, taking in the gorgeous laciness of its twigs, its graceful branches reaching skyward. It just wanted me to notice. One autumn, my husband and I had a painful decision to make about his parents, who lived in a mobile home on our property. His father needed more care than his mother or we could provide, and we made the decision to place him in a nursing home. About the same time, my husband's mother experienced recurring bouts of dizziness that no medication could help, even after 2 visits to the emergency room. Stressed and exhausted, I visited the cottonwood. As I rested my hand on one of its curving branches, I began to sob. Its strength flowed into me. I felt knots of worry in my muscles begin to loosen. The cottonwood reminded me to bend with the circumstances, to believe that even in these challenging moments, peace can be found and beauty experienced, that I am not alone. The trees will gladly help me to find peace even in the most difficult of times.
What's interesting is that there's actually a feedback loop. The trees give to you, but you give to them also.
Absolutely.
So how did you discover this gift?
Well, when I was standing by trees, just being quiet with them, I would start to feel, often the feeling would be that there was a flow of energy coming from the tree, coming under the ground into my feet, up through my body, out the top of my head, and up into the top of the trees. And this loop would continue. And then eventually, as I became a little more understanding of how all of this communication goes on, I began to see an infinity symbol, the 8 symbol, flowing usually from my heart to the tree and back. And in this flow, we often ended up sharing some of our knowledge with each other, even though I didn't always know exactly what it was at the time. It seemed like it would just be there when I needed it. And another thing I found much later on, this just really surprised me because I didn't know it was happening at the time. But I visited my son who lived in Alaska at the time. When I came back, I went to visit a craniosacral therapist who has the ability to also actually see the trees. They would even appear to him in our session, and he would be able to describe them. And he said one of the trees, the power tree, was wanting me to go stand close to it because some trees from Alaska had given me a message for this tree. And I had no idea this had happened. So I went and stood by the power tree and just kind of waited, and then the power tree let me know it had received the message, and I wanted to know what it was. And this happened several times, and one of the loveliest messages that I remember it telling me it received was this: "Stand tall, I recognize your worth." And I have thought about that so much for myself and for others, because we sometimes don't realize that others recognize our worth. And so we should stand tall. And the trees need to hear that as well. They are living beings, creatures of God, created by God. They have they need to know that we're acknowledging them and recognizing their worth. When I first started visiting with the trees, I would also send Reiki to them, and they really responded to that. And I would send it in such a way that it not only went to that tree, but to everything close by that wanted to receive it. And in the process of that, I discovered that the trees have a need for there are certain Reiki symbols that go with this that really help to promote healing. And one of those symbols involves removing emotional and physical toxins. And the trees just really seemed to like that symbol a lot. And then there's another symbol that's a very powerful but gentle healing symbol, and it always seemed like first they wanted the removal of the physical and emotional toxins, and then they wanted this other particular symbol. There are other symbols too that help to promote healing, but this one is especially gentle but especially powerful. And they liked those two in combination very much. And I've noticed as I work with people that sometimes they also need that combination of symbols.
One of the sections in your book, you show how this really is an availability to people. In your tool section, you show some aspects. Do you want to read one of those?
Oh, okay. Well, let me read. This one is under the category of leadership tools.
Okay.
It's the third tool in that category, and I call it Wholeness. They can be used by anyone.
Great.
So the trees just really give you an insight into things that are true, truths that help us to live our life a little better. And so these tools all came as I was standing in front of the the power tree, and it's a huge cottonwood tree. And it would tell me what some of these tools were,
Oh.
and it would there would be like one day, and then later on there would be another one, and finally, over a period of about 3 years, all of these 11 categories of tools came to me and through the tree. And later, after they were all finished, I would think, well, I wonder if there are more. And so I would stand by the tree and say, do you have more? And never, that was it. Anyway, so this is the category of the leadership tools. And the tool is called Wholeness. This tool helps you remember what it feels like to be connected to everyone and everything. Imagine looking into a round pool of water along with other people who are standing at the edge, peering into it. Trees, bushes, and woodland animals are also reflected in the pool. As you imagine seeing everyone's bodies reflected in the water, watch ripples begin to form on the pool's surface. The ripples turn each reflection into images that start to blend into each other. You are one with all of them, and they are one with you. This act of blending into a whole allows God to work through all of you to do what is needed in the moment. And to stop reading for a minute and just to clarify, I don't want people to be put off by the word God. That just happens to be what I have always been comfortable calling this divine presence in our lives. But if that's not comfortable to you, just call that whatever is comfortable to you every time I say that word. If you're a parent, boss, club president, or the organizer of a community yard sale, you may feel the weight of the world sitting on your shoulders. What decisions should you make? How should you solve this problem or that disagreement? When you sense the oneness that unites us all, it becomes apparent that you don't have to know all the answers or have all the solutions. If you have no idea what to do, turn to others in your group for help. Ask them for suggestions. Recognize that someone else in the group, in your family, or among your friends may have an excellent approach to whatever problem needs to be fixed. You don't lessen your image in other people's eyes when you ask for help. You enhance it because you are recognizing the contributions they have to offer. In this way, you are forging a stronger, more powerful whole. Let God use the blending of your beings to orchestrate events. As a leader, you bear responsibility, but you don't have to stand alone. Turn to others for help, ask God for guidance, and watch to see how the oneness that unites us all results in fabulous ideas and creative solutions. Once we remember our oneness, we recall that our connection unites us with all the possibilities and potentials that exist everywhere in the universe. We are connected with divine wisdom in a constant, uninterrupted flow. When we realize that, we discover what an asset the oneness tool is to our leadership.
I find it interesting that the words you use often is our wholeness and oneness.
Yes.
And I think they work together, and there's something missing in a lot of people's lives today.
I think we forget. We have forgotten who we really are. We get so weighted down with the everyday problems we face that we just forget to see beyond that to the sense of wholeness. That's why the giving tree, the one that I read first, was such a wonderful gift to me. Not only did its shape remind me that it bends with the circumstances. It doesn't let itself be overwhelmed by wind and rain and weather of all sorts. It bends with the circumstances, and it's willing to lend some of its strength to us as we stand by it in our own need. And I know at that point in my life when we had those difficult decisions to make about my husband's parents, it was overwhelming for me. And I just, sometimes when you're overwhelmed, you can't think or see beyond the problem that you're facing. And that's where trees really help us to get beyond that and see a bigger picture. And trees really love to be acknowledged. And if you notice a tree that it's just beautiful to you, you really like it, you can stand there and tell it how beautiful you think it is. And just stand there for a while until you sense that the tree has received that and recognizes that it has been acknowledged. And that could take a minute or two or three or more, but it doesn't take a long time, just enough time to make that connection.
Right.
And another thing I've really noticed with trees is that sometimes I go by a tree and it just seems to call me, and it wants me to pray for it. And so I do. I stop and pray that God will give it whatever it needs to deal with whatever situation it's facing, which I don't happen to know at that moment. And immediately it responds. There you can sense it's taken in that prayer, and it has made whatever connection it needs with that divinity that sometimes it can forget too, because it gets overwhelmed at times. And so that taught me that we sometimes forget how powerful prayer can be. Because the trees respond to it immediately, then we probably do too, even though we don't always recognize it. When this book was written, I lived in the country just north of Aztec, and I moved a little over 2 years ago to Farmington, and I live in a subdivision now, and I sometimes walk around several blocks, and occasionally there will be a tree that really wants to connect with me. And as I was walking past this one section of houses, this juniper really caught my attention, and it's planted right in front of this person's house. And so I just went up and greeted it, and I just prayed that God would help it in whatever way it needed. And I didn't really know why it had called my attention, but it really just wanted to say hello, and it seemed like it was happy to see me. And so each time that I would go, the next time I would ask what its name was. Mm-hmm. And really wasn't sure. I would get names of different flowers that I thought maybe it was a tree with a flower name attached. And it just, I wasn't quite picking it up. And so the next visit I made, I asked, "Do I have your name right?" And the tree let me know. It always comes as a thought in my mind. Mm-hmm. He said, "I'm just juniper." So now that tree to me, I call it just juniper.
I love that. That's great.
And when I round the corner on the sidewalk, and there's still like a couple, 2 or 3 houses, I can feel its love coming to me, and it just greets me as so glad to see me. And I can't tell you how wonderful that is, to be able to walk and feel the friendliness of some trees. Now, not every tree is like that. Just don't really want to connect, but other trees do.
But you write about the trees here as if they're friends of yours. So was it hard to leave them?
Oh, it was hard. Yeah. It was really, really hard to leave them. And I still, in my mind, I still go back and walk the irrigation ditch and greet them. And the day that I left, the last day that I walked out of my house forever, there was a cottonwood in the front yard, and I was getting ready to head for my car, and it just caught my attention. I just saw kind of like a reflection of like light from somewhere else. It was, and I'm sure I had seen this before. It was just sort of a natural thing that happened, but I really noticed it that day. And trees have a way of taking natural things and making you notice them more than you would. And so I stopped and said, okay, this tree has something to tell me. And so I stopped and just listened. And as I focused on it, I sensed that it was giving me its blessing to move on. And it said, flow with the change. And I thought, oh, it wouldn't tell me that unless it was saying it's okay. We'll be all right. You'll be all right. Flow with the change.
I love that.
And that really helped me.
Oh, yes.
And then when I got to my new house, there is a big juniper in the front yard. And that juniper was one of the friendliest trees I have ever come across. And it was just like welcoming me to the new place. And I would notice if I was just lying in bed, sort of halfway between sleep and awake. One day I thought, oh, where am I? And it was like my spirit was resting in the branches of that juniper. And it was like it was treating me almost like a baby that needed to be rocked. Because I needed to be comforted, because it was very hard for me to move. I had lived in that house almost 43 years. And those trees and the river that flowed nearby had become very good friends.
Yes.
And so it took a while, but that juniper really helped me and he told me his name was Jonathan Juniper, so that's what I call him.
I love that. Jonathan Juniper. Very good. So where can our listeners find your book or more information about trees?
Okay, well, I know of several places in Farmington and Aztec that you can find it. Amy's Bookcase has several copies of Healing with Trees, Finding a Path to Wholeness. It also has copies of my other book called The Healing Tree, which is a young adult fantasy novel involving a lot of the trees that I've come to know. And they have both books. The Farmington Museum store has, I think, has one or both books. I know Aztec Museum used to have a copy of The Healing Tree. I don't know if they still do. Feet of Clay in Aztec has several copies of my book. Let me just add a recent experience that I had with a friend of mine who had lost a very special person in her life just a few months ago. And she invited me over to her house, and she has a lot of trees in her huge backyard. And she wanted me to see if any of them had special needs or had anything to communicate. And I really didn't sense anything coming from any of the trees, but there was a huge salt bush. I mean, this is big, tall, probably 7-8 feet tall. And you can see rabbits scurrying under it and birds flying from it. And that salt bush loves her so much. And I just let her know, this bush really, really loves you. And the last time I visited her, we just, went to visit again the bushes and trees. And as we rounded the back of her house to enter the backyard, we were probably 100 feet away from that tree, and I could feel the love
Oh, wow.
coming to that tree and also to me because I was with her. You know, we are not alone, even though in our grief, sometimes we feel that we are, but we're not. And there's so much love around us.
Well, thank you so much for coming to talk to me and letting me read your book.
Oh, you are so welcome. Thank you for taking time for me.
Is there a place that readers can contact you?
Yes, there's a couple of ways that they can.
Okay.
I am usually at Petco selling Connie Gotch's fiction books about dogs,
Right.
and my two books about trees from about 12:30 to 2 on Sunday afternoons and 12:30 to 2 on Tuesday afternoons.
Okay.
And then my email address is M, like my name, Margaret, writer, WRITER, 4571 at yahoo.com. And they can email me there if they would like a speaker for their group,
Great.
or, just to talk about the book or see about ordering one. They can contact me through my email. Thank you, Tracy. It was very pleasant.
And that was Margaret Cheasebro talking about her book, Healing with Trees, Finding a Path to Wholeness. This is Tracy Hales Vast on KSJE 90.9 FM in Farmington, New Mexico.